Today's video is going to be about the suspension modifications that I performed to our CRF230L. The modifications that were done to this bike were replacing the front forks with CRF230F forks and putting a rear shock in it from a 82 XR200R. Both of these modifications are basically bolt-on modifications. The front forks slip right into the clamps and the back bolts in with a few minor modifications. As part of this video, I brought my 250L up so that we can look at it and compare seat height of this to what the 230 now sits at. Again, as far as parts for this project, the forks are off of a CRF 230F, which I got off of eBay, and then the rear shock I was able to purchase a parts bike that I got the shock from. So as I stated, the bike, we did two upgrades. One was replacing the front forks with CRF 230F forks, and then the rear shock with a XR 200R shock, which I got off of a parts bike. So let's get into the forks, explain to you what we had to do to make this work. The fork modifications were pretty straightforward. These forks are a direct bolt-in replacement of the factory ones. So it's really just as simple as removing the tire, the brakes, and pulling the forks out, sliding them back in, and clamping them back down. The only things that I had to change here, one is the brake line. The brake line for this bike from the factory runs behind the forks up to the back corner of the fender, where you can see there's a little hole in the fender that there was a bracket there it ran through, then back behind the headlight. So with these forks, as most dirt bikes, they run up the front of the fork, and I had to buy this clamp to clamp the hose in, and then I also bought the little bracket here to run the hose through also. My goal on this was to put that bracket up on the upper bolt and have the hose come up and over the bars, well, the speedometer, just like it is on the 250, but the hose was not long enough. So that is a modification I still plan on doing, is putting a longer hose on. What's here is working fine, but I would feel better to have it going up the fork all the way and then over the top of the instrument cluster. The second modification with this, and again, you probably can get away without doing this, but I felt more comfortable making this change, is I put a longer speedometer cable on. I bought a cable for a 91 XR 250L, and the only reason I did this is because when these forks were fully extended, the factory cable was a little tight, and I was just concerned that it would cause us problems down the road. So I put the longer cable in. It was a direct bolt-in, and they were the only things that had to be done for the front forks. Now, moving on to the rear of the bike, again, we installed the shock off of a XR 200R. Needs to be a 1982 or 83. I will talk about another shock I bought that I put in here prior to this one that did work, which was off of a 85 XR 250R, but I winded up having a problem, and I'll go through all that. I think you can make that shock work if you couldn't find the 200R shock, but I'll give you some details on that. So anyway, again, this is another basically bolt-in modification. A couple small mods you have to do to the bike, but nothing major. I'll try to get you a little picture of the shock in there. It's hard to see with it being buried, but I will also have some stills that I'll put into this video. So basically, the first modification you have to do is the top of the shock is wider than the factory. So there's two options there. You can either cut down the spacer that's welded to the frame, which is basically just a piece of pipe that is, I guess, 1/4 inch or so in diameter, maybe a little bigger. I cut out probably about a little less than 1/4 inch out of that to make the shock fit. The other option you have, which I did do on this other shock, is to grind it down at the top or mill it down. So on this one here, I did mill some thickness out of this. Well, not mill it, but I ground it. I wish I had a milling machine to make it work. When I got the other shock, I just felt better to not do that to the shock. I didn't like how it came out on that one, and I just felt it was cleaner. And worst case scenario, if I decide to ever put the factory shock back in, I can put a bushing in between there, a little spacer, to make it work. Or for that matter, if I really want to, I could cut the spacer out that's there and weld a new piece in that's the right length. Next mod on this is with the linkage. The linkage on this is very close. There's the knob that's on the bottom of the shock, and again, I don't know if you can see that in there, is very close to the bottom of the, or to the top of the linkage. So when the shock is fully compressed, it winds up hitting the adjustment knob for the rebound. And that's what happened to me on the other shock, and I winded up blowing the seal out of the bottom of the shock in the rebound and having to replace the shock. So I ground out probably about an 1/8 inch on this, and it clears. You know, I ran it through the full stroke with no spring on the shock to make sure we were getting full movement and had 0 issues. Next modification is actually to the shock. It's, again, not really a mod, but had to change the hose that runs from the shock to the reservoir. So I just went to a local hose shop and had to make up what I needed. Again, I will add some pictures of that. But it fits in right here is where I got the reservoir mounted. I made a little bracket that holds it. It tucks in there nicely. Really didn't see anywhere else that was very good to put it and still have access. You can see I can still get at the knob without any issue to make the adjustments we want. The bolt holes in the frame, these 2 holes are actually there already. So I used what was there, so I didn't have to drill out the frame or anything. And then just welded nuts to the back side of this bracket I built. Last modification for this is the kickstand. And again, since I had the parts bike, I was able to pull the kickstand off of the 200R and install it. I'll show you the factory one up against this, the 200R, and you'll see that we have quite a bit of a difference in length here. So my original plan was I was just going to take this one and cut it and sleeve it and extend it, but since I winded up buying the parts bike, I was able to just reuse the one that's on the or that was on the 200R. So again, that's the modifications that I did. The bike itself sits about 1.5 inches to 2 inches higher. Didn't measure it before we did the mods, but according to websites and stuff, the seat height on this bike was 31.9 inches. The current seat height on it is about 33 3/4. And then just to reference it to the 250, the seat height on this, when I measured it, was about 34 1/4, or 34 1/4, right in that area. So they're very close to the same height. These bikes both have the same tires on them. We did the tire changes when we did the shock on this. So, you know, the height of the bike, again, is around 33 3/4. If you wanted a little lower, you could change the back tire. That tire I put on there, it's probably a little bigger than what I should have on the bike. I upsized it to the same as I put on the 250, and I get a little bit of rubbing on the one guard, but overall it's fine. I think another little more riding of it, the chain will get adjusted back a little bit more, and we'll be fine. Anyway, so a couple other things I just want to talk to you about on this. Again, about the shocks and things. So when I was looking at this and trying to figure everything out, you know, I wasn't finding a lot of information that I definitely was positive were the right lengths and things. So first off, the factory shock, this shock is 12.5 inches center to center on the mounting points. The one that is in the bike, the 200R, is 13 inches center to center. And then this one is the 250R that I was telling you about, and it's about 13.5 center to center. So again, I had this on here. It was working fine. Everything was good. The only problem we had, which again I wound up having to modify with the other one, was the top of the linkage. So this linkage, this is the linkage from the 200, and it's a little different shape. The linkage from the 230L is a little more squared off, and it comes up a little higher and then around. But same basic shape, and I did try to put this on the bike, but it wouldn't fit. So I went with the existing, and I just had to take a little bit out, you know, right here in this area, because as you can see, that'll hit against there. And remember, there should be a knob in here actually, so this would come down lower, so you would hit sooner. And that's what happened with this one. The knob that was in there, as it compressed, this was coming up, hitting that knob, and then ultimately, if you can see that, you can see this maybe is moving right here. So what happened was we blew the seals out in the bottom of the shock, causing it to lose all of its charge. So I believe that, again, I had this in the bike. It worked. It was tight. To get all the bolts lined up with this shock, I had to adjust the spring all the way up so I can get some compression and get everything lined up. I think with a little more grinding on the back side here, you could make it work. Again, not positive. I mean, if you took the knob off and didn't have it in there, but that kind of defeats the purpose of being able to make the adjustments. You know, it would hit the shock. But again, the shock you need to do this is really a 200R from 82 or 83 are the only years with this shock. So it was very tough for me to find. I was looking and looking, and I got lucky that, again, a guy had a parts bike I was able to buy for 150 bucks. It was a rolling chassis, just no engine. And get that plus some of the other things I needed with this to make the mod. I mean, overall, I would say I probably have about a 350 bucks maybe in this. You know, I think the front forks were about 150. You know, then you had the clamps and the speedometer cable, and then the other parts on the back. So I'm in that 350-ish range, I'm guessing, for this mod. Definitely improves the ride of the bike for woods riding, for trail riding. Greatly improves it. Better seat height for a taller rider. Again, the other seat height was on the low side. So I think this is a great modification. And if you have one of these bikes and you're doing a lot of trail riding, I think this is a mod that you should really consider. Again, you're going to have to plan it out and take some time and look for the rear shock. Would be my recommendation. Find that rear shock first and get it. Make sure it's in good condition. If you can get one that has a charge, even better. The one I got off of that bike when I took it apart to change the hose, the fluid, you know, the oil in it looked like brand new. I think that bike that I got had a very easy life, and you know, I did change the oil. I didn't rebuild this shock. I felt that it seemed like it was in good condition. If I do run into a problem down the road, I will rebuild it, but as of right now, I haven't. And then I would go and buy the front forks. I did it the opposite way, and you know, we put the forks on, and I had to keep looking and looking, and you know, it took me quite a while to find that rear shock. And I bought this one first, the 250R, because I thought it was the right one, because it's the same shock that's in the 84 and 85 XR200R. So I just assumed it was the right one, but again, you got to get that 82 or 83 because you need the 13.5-inch long shock. I did also research some stuff for some ATCs and things like that, and they were too short. So again, I just kept looking till I found one for the 200R. Anyhow, I hope if you're looking to do a modification like this, that this video helps you out. And, you know, you can leave comments down below. And if you have any questions on where or what I did, please free to ask. So thank you.